Hello everyone, my name is Victoria Situya. I am an immigrant rights activist. I lit this candle in honor of my sister who passed away a few years ago. She liked candles and she used to live in Soweto. And because I'm going to be talking about apartheid, I thought this would be a good opportunity to honor her and her contributions to the struggle. She lived in Soweto, where Mandela lived, and some of his wives. She lived in Joburg. She also lived in Pretoria. First of all, I would like to review the videos that I posted in reference to my proposal for the Community Policing Review Board. In those videos, I was trying to make a suggestion as to a type of a person that, in my view, in my perspective, would be a good candidate for such a review board. And at the time, I was under the impression that members of a community had a say as to what this review board, or as to what this council would look like. But it appears that I was wrong. And I was wrong because the city council already appointed people that they put in the advisory policing board. So where do we go from there? I wanted to transition from those examples into how I perceived the Community Policing Review Board would look like. This organization would be put in power by the people who have been fighting injustice. And if you recall, I had suggested in one video that it would involve police or some type of policing in it. What I meant by that was that it would involve people who had a background in policing. But the people who would sign over, people who would have the power, would be the community, not the government. It would be the people, it would be the community who decided who could be a police in the community, who was not fit to be a police officer in the community. They would decide what type of training the police officers needed. And it would be these people who were put in that place by the community themselves. It would be these people who would sign off at every stage of the policing activities. Okay, so this has not occurred because the mayor has already appointed or selected an advisory council. And in my perspective, that council is not valid. It is not legitimate because it does not originate out of the activism movement that has spun this platform into existence. And what's my basis for this perception? Let me take you very briefly to the activist movement that I came from in South Africa. When I was in my very early teens, somewhere around 13 and 14 years old, I was already in high school. There were a lot of youth movements that were active in dismantling apartheid. And in my school and other schools And in my school in Lesotho and other schools in South Africa, there were different movements with that type of a focus. Later on in my high school years, I think maybe it was when I was around 14, 15, I became a member of the Young Christian movements, whose goal was to mobilize Christianity into dispensing justice. This was how Dr. Mandela's ANC engaged Christianity into dismantling apartheid. This was one of the many modes of operation. But for me, the crowning moment was when President de Klerk signed the power over to ANC. So it was the white man in power who decided that what had been happening to the black and brown people there was enough. He signed the power over to ANC to give power to the people who were oppressed. He didn't try to create an illusion of something that looked like power and have Mandela as his vice president or something. No, he stepped down. Why am I emphasizing this handing over of power? It is because of the lack of handing over of that power that leads me to conclude that what happened in the Salt Lake City Council is not legitimate. You have the masses arising because of police brutality in the United States. And then you have the government making decisions and conclusions and appointing its councils. That's not legitimate. It's still a power grab that we had 10 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. Why am I saying that? Because the people are still under the same supremacy. This advisory council is still it's still subordinate to the supremacy. I guess what I'm saying is, if this city council had any intention to dissolve killer police, they would have done it a long time ago. They wouldn't have waited for this movement to arise. And if they truly wanted to dissolve the killer police movement, they would have handed over the entire power, handed over the power, like de Klerk did in apartheid. They would have handed power over to the people and have the people decide who is going to run the policing. We have very qualified people in the community, very intelligent members of the community who can serve in different capacities and decide who's qualified to be good police officers who are not going to kill us, who are not going to throw our sons and daughters and husbands on deportation flights. Because there is no handing over of power in the selection of the Salt Lake community policing. Because of that, I find that it is not a legitimate organization. The advisory council is not legitimate. I'm not saying that the people who have been selected to that positions or who have been elected to that positions, I'm not saying they haven't done any community work. I am saying they should be put there by the people who spun this movement into existence. I'm saying the appointments are not legitimate because they were done by the government, and it is not the government that has created this activist energy. In fact, what the government has done is to create what I call auto-activism. Auto-activism is the best term I could come up with to explain similar situations that occurred in the apartheid movement. This is when you destabilize the activist movement by picking the good people out of the movement and using them against each other. That's not right. And how can auto-activism be avoided? I'll give you a scenario. I'm sorry for pointing your finger. I know that means different things in different cultures. I need to stop pointing your finger, but I just use that for emphasis. When Trayvon Martin had been shot, we were at the Matheson courthouse, and there were different journalists there. One journalist asked Tim DeChristopher to speak, and Tim DeChristopher said no. If you don't know who Tim DeChristopher is, he's an environmental activist, and he's a white man. He said no. He pointed to me. He said, "Why don't you give her the microphone?" That journalist, her name is Mackenzie. She didn't come to me. And what I just shared with you there is a demonstration of, how somebody overcame auto-activism. Tim DeChristopher refused to be used against people who should be given a platform when it comes to issues that relate to their livelihoods. He refused to speak on black issues when he's a white man, and when there were black people there. A young man had been shot. People like me, I have sons. There were others too with black sons and daughters. But this journalist wanted to give the microphone to a white man, and he said no. If he had agreed, he would have participated in what I call auto-activism. Let's not do that. Okay. I love you guys, and I hope to see you in my next video. And